welcome Pastor Agu. We are very honored to have you with us.
Thank you. The challenge with an introduction like that is that it sets the bar so high. So it's a pleasure to be here. It's a real pleasure. I hope I can share some things that can encourage us. I was listening to the panel, and if I wasn't feeling any pressure, by the time the panel finished, I was under serious pressure. And I must trust the Spirit of God to help me go through this next 15 minutes. I wondered how to introduce myself. My name is Agu. I practiced at home, and I thought I was going to say I was trained as a lawyer. Then I worked as an investment banker, but I thought those two things would just nullify generosity. So let me just go straight to it and say I pastor a church called Jesus House, and I have oversight over the 856 churches that are part of the Redeemed Christian Church of God. We want to talk for 15 minutes or so, and that, of course, is a challenge for a black Pentecostal preacher, but Bishop Michael Curry has driven that home into the fabric of our society. We want to talk for 15 minutes about inspiring radical generosity, how to encourage Christians to give of their time, their talent, and their treasure. Of course, we're going to be focusing largely on their treasure because that's what this is about. And I just want to, in that time, just kind of mention 12 things that let a black Pentecostal preacher lose. 12 things that I think have really helped us at Jesus House. Some we're better at. Quite a number of them we're still on a journey as we learn how to inspire greater generosity from those who come to the church and from a few who don't come to the church but who give. And so number one, the first thing would be a vision. We found that when you share vision clearly, when the vision is big, when the vision is exciting, when the people see themselves in the vision, and you share it regularly, it inspires giving. And so a lot of what I do at Jesus House is share vision. I share it to the larger church, I share it to the smaller groups. I just paint a picture of where we hope to go, a picture of what we feel God has shown us as a church. And once you get people connected to a vision, you'll be amazed as to what people will do, especially how far people will go to give sacrificially. So the first thing is a vision. The second thing is transparency, letting people know where their money is going. We do that, we take that very seriously at Jesus House. We'll devote one whole Sunday. There won't be a service to just sharing with the congregation about the amount of money that has come in and how the money has been spent. My favorite phrase on those Sundays is that you might not like how I have instructed with the executive that the money be spent. You give us that responsibility because we run the church, but you will certainly know where the money has been spent. And I feel that's very important, the transparency. We publish an annual report, like most of you do, that breaks down the amount of money we've collected and how the money has been spent. We provide constantly opportunities for people to go and ask questions about the finances of the church. The interesting thing is that we provide the opportunities, but then not many people go, simply because the opportunities are provided. And they know that if you've provided the opportunity, then they generally conclude that you're doing what you should be doing. If not, you wouldn't be saying to them, come and ask us about what we're doing. So transparency, number two. Number three, it's important for the leaders to model it. I have a personal responsibility to model generosity for the church. I make sure that all the leaders model generosity. You'd be amazed and quite a number of church leaders here, and you know that, as to what people see and look for in the church. So a member of the church said to me, when we receive our weekly collection, the weekly donations, the offering we call it, and the member of the church said to me, but when I look at the front where most of the leaders sit, not all of you are giving. Now, I knew all of them were giving, but I realized what happened. Because we have multiple services, they give in one service and they don't give in the other services because they've already given their offering for the day. And so I had a meeting with them and I said, whatever you've decided to give, you break it up into the number of services so that at each service, the people who are watching can see that we are modeling generosity. That's just an example. But just realize as leaders, people are watching you. And so use every opportunity to model what you are asking them to do. Number 4, celebrate the outcome of people's generosity. Every time there's an outcome from people giving, we take the time from the pulpit to talk about it, talk about the results, to tie it into God's commission to us as a church, and basically to celebrate the fact that with this giving, so many lives have been changed, this community has been changed, so much has been done to advance the kingdom of God. And we always use that opportunity to say thank you. It's very important to say thank you. Number 5, we pay attention to the big donors. We don't rate them higher than those who give less, but we pay attention to them. They're brought to my attention personally. I tend to have personal relationships with them. I input into their discipleship in a personal way. And I generally find out what they want, which usually has nothing to do with money because they already have enough of that. And see how I can facilitate them getting what they want. And a lot of these various things. Sometimes they want to meet someone within the larger Christian body. And I say, that's not a problem. Come with me to my next conference or my next this, and I'll introduce you to that person. So we pay attention to the big donors. Number 6, accountability. And with that, I want to say, don't assume that because it exists, because you know that the structure exists, we're accountable. Don't assume that people know. Let them know that this exists, that it's priority for us, that we have a system where people are accountable to each other and to the system. Number 7, know the giving rhythm. And most church leaders will know that here, that there's a giving rhythm in every church. There are some times that are just no-nos if you want to do a massive fundraising drive or something of that nature. In the church that I pastor, coming up to Christmas, we focus a lot of our giving on things around Christmas. The fact that there are more homeless people at Christmas. People in the midst of the celebration, people will feel lonely. And there's a lot of giving towards Christmas, giving to those who are in prison, the families of prisoners. There's just a lot of giving. It's a good season for us if we want to raise funds for those kinds of causes. And of course, once we come back in January, we're not going to be talking about giving for the first 2 or 3 months of the year because they've given a lot at Christmas. They've mostly traveled somewhere at Christmas, and they're now trying to cope with the new year. So it's just knowing the giving rhythm. Number 8, take advantage of technology. We have an online congregation, and we've been amazed as to how when we focused on the online congregation and are focusing on it, giving them an experience of church, making them feel a part of it, we found that the giving from the online congregation has increased and is increasing dramatically. We've also realized that with online giving for us as a church, people don't give on a Sunday alone. You've just got to provide the opportunity for people to give all through the week what we would have collected if the people were there physically on a Sunday alone. We've also used technology, like we have an app that facilitates giving. Like most of you, we've done all the usual stuff with technology, text giving. But I just wanted to say there's so much mileage that we can get out of technology. Number 9, teach about giving, about generosity, about the biblical position on being generous with our time, our talent, and our treasure. I've gained many things from being in England. I came here ages ago to go to boarding school and went to university here. And along the way, I unknowingly have imbibed a lot of the English culture. And a lot of it I love, but the one that I'm determined to get rid of is that English reticence to talk about money. Because the Bible does talk about money, and we must talk about money. We must teach, we must get over the awkwardness and teach people about generosity, about biblical generosity. And so we're learning to do that. It was a major weakness for me because I just didn't want to talk about it. But I realized that if you can teach about holiness and about faith and about relationships and about every other thing the Bible talks about, you must also be able to teach people about money, because generosity is caught, but it is also taught. And we must be able to do that. We must teach about stewardship of God's resources. And one thing I want to encourage when you start that journey is patience. It takes patience to be able to change people's thinking, a culture, or a mindset. You know, generally people would say we're a very generous church, especially with regards to social causes, injustice, poverty, marginalization. That's a big thing for us. We give a lot in that area. But it hasn't always been like that. We remember exactly when we started that journey of educating the congregation, changing people's mindsets, rearranging people's priorities. It took us round about 7 years or 8 years of constantly teaching in that area to get the church to the place where the church is now. Number 10, for us as a church, we teach our members to be financially prudent and how to better manage their finances. Every time we talk about money, it's not taking from them, it's also giving to them. It's letting them know that we're thinking about the welfare of the members, the people in the congregation. We want to empower you. We especially focus on stirring up entrepreneurial skills and gifts, because we know that the next businessman or woman who is going to become a major donor is sitting there in the church, has the skills, but doesn't know really how to go about birthing a business or starting a business, and might not have the right network that will help them. And we try and stir that up in the church. Number 11, understand your donors, I would say, your members. Understand the things that motivate people to give. Understand the demographic nature of those you're reaching out to. And we do that. And so we can tailor our fundraising to the different groups in the church, knowing that different things motivate people to give. So, of course, we know that the millennials in our church love to give to social causes. They feel that they're the only ones that can change the world, and they'll give their time, their talent, and their treasure to change the world. And so when we're doing fundraising, then we use the millennials. We appeal to the millennials. They also have the energy to help us raise funds. And the different groups in the church, there are different things that will appeal to them. Women are having a gathering, and they're raising funds for women who are in areas of the world where the church is persecuted. And the zeal and the passion with which they are going about raising it, because they are women and they identify with those women. And so we try to understand our donors. And lastly, and I think I'm doing well for a black Pentecostal pastor, lastly, number 12, and this is very important for us, we pray for the Spirit of God to inspire members to give. We know that there's only so much you can do with all the other things, that really at the heart of it, for us, we're a praying community, at the heart of it, it is God who inspires people to give sacrificially. God who inspires people to go beyond the norm in their giving. And there's a story in the Bible that I love, and this is kind of, any pastor would pray to be in the place that Moses was when he was raising an offering for the building of the tabernacle. And as I end, I wanted to read this to you. It's taken from Exodus, the 36th chapter, verses 2 to 7, and I'm reading the Message. I just want to read this very quickly. Moses summoned Bezalel and Oholiab with all the men who were gifted. The men were eager to get started and engage in the work. They took from Moses all the offerings that the Israelites brought for the work of constructing the sanctuary. The people kept on bringing in their free will offerings morning after morning. Oh, please, let me be in Moses' position. All the artisans who were at work making everything involved in constructing the sanctuary came one after another to Moses saying, "The people are bringing more than enough for doing this work that God has commanded us to do." So Moses sent out orders throughout the camp. Men, women, no more offerings for the building of the sanctuary. The people were ordered to stop bringing offerings, and there was plenty of material for the work. I kind of hope that would be our story by the time we gather next year. We'll be sharing testimonies of how we went back and said, "No more, it's just a bit too much. We don't know where to keep the money." I hope that has helped someone, those 12 things. For us, those are the things that undergird how we stir up giving, encourage people to give, how we motivate people to give. And I hope in some way that you might have picked one thing or two things. Maybe when we ask questions, I might be able to amplify one or two of them, and we might be able to take something away that might encourage us on this journey. Thank you very much.
That was superb. If you're happy to stay there, we'll take one or two questions. Pastor Agu, that was so helpful.
Thank you.
Such a, in fact, distinctive combination of encouraging members to become prosperous, focused attention on the higher givers, appealing to the right audiences with the right proposition. Many, many things that we'll find really helpful. I'm going to invite questions at this point while the microphones are flying around. Can I ask about your ninth point on teaching?
Yeah.
In many churches, people are encouraged to give sacrificially, and certainly in my church, there's a very wide range of interpretations of the word sacrificial. Are you quantitative? Do you encourage tithing, for instance?
Well, we do. We encourage tithing, but we wouldn't see tithing as sacrificial. Because that's, for us, that's part of what we do as part of our basic worship to God. Yes. I mean, sacrificial for us would be something that is outside the normal, something that stretches you.
Yes.
Something, and it wouldn't be normal.
Yes.
For us in terms of sacrificial.
There is deep within many church members a fear of coming to want. Saying a fear of want, of being short, of saying if I give, £1,000, £10,000 to the church, I won't be able to provide for my family. There is clearly experience that God is not limited by arithmetic, and there is biblical promise of blessing. Yeah. How do you communicate that without going straight into the kind of prosperity gospel territory?
Okay. I think for us there are two things. And one doesn't go without the other. And I think both of them bring balance. I think there's the word, what God says in his Bible. There are many examples of people who have stepped out on a limb in their giving, and how God has responded in blessing them. But then there's also the Spirit. And we teach a lot in our church for people to develop a personal relationship with the Holy Spirit. You see, that prevents a lot of manipulation, because you're listening out for the Spirit of God as opposed to listening solely to a man. And so the balance of the Word and the Spirit, I think, would solve that problem, because the Word tells you what to do. The Spirit gives you the grace and the enablement to do what you wouldn't be able to do ordinarily. That's the whole essence of the relationship with the Holy Spirit.
Thank you. It's beautifully put, Pastor.
Thank you.
Now, do we have any questions? As before, if you've got a microphone near you, just grab it and...
I've got a mic in my hand, so I imagine that means I can speak.
Please.
Sorry, it's over here. It's Rod Whitehead here. I've just become treasurer of a church. And our church's policy is that the pastor shouldn't know what anyone gives, that his focus should purely be on their souls. So maybe it's a question for both of you as to whether you think it's appropriate.
Okay, for us, I've got a fantastic team that runs our finances, and I think the lady is here somewhere. She's absolutely first class, and she keeps away all the details from me. She runs the whole thing. She's competent. But then I think because I oversee the organization, I think there are certain things that should be brought to my attention. And so if someone gives a large sum that is out of the ordinary, we want to know, because I want to have a conversation with the person to just make sure the money has come from the right sources, and all that. Yeah, so that's important because I run the organization, so I need to know that. If someone also gives a significantly large donation, I think I need to know for a number of reasons. Number one, I run the organization, and there are many things I could do. If somebody gives like that, then there's a likelihood that that person has the heart of a treasurer. I owe it to that person to pray for that person. For God, in the same way that I would pray for somebody who's called to be a prophet or called to be an apostle or called to be any of the other ministries, there are also those who are called to step out in that way to give. And if I didn't know, then I can't include that person in my prayers. And I hope they think my prayers matter. So they would be telling me, this person has given in this way, so we want you to know. But they wouldn't bog me down with the details. They're competent to deal with that. But I think as the person who runs the organization, I need an overall picture.
No, thank you. And to answer the question, because you asked us both, I think there are a number of models. We're a church of about 600, and the chair of the finance subcommittee of the PCC is the individual, rather than the clergy, who actually knows who is giving what. There are some very good examples. We don't particularly do it, but there are good examples of churches where sometimes the finance team also take individual discussions with key donors, because clearly their intentions are very important to the future of the church, and understanding them are key. Do we have another question?
Hi, yeah, it's Elizabeth Daly from the Diocese of London. My question is related to, have you ever come across churches who have a sort of theological objection to having an income generation strategy or a business plan? Even if you haven't, do you have any advice about how you can counter those objections?
That's really helpful from a diocese, yes. And I think just broadening it, that there are feelings that actually, Lord has the cattle and sheep on 1,000 hills. We shouldn't be intentional. We shouldn't have fundraisers, let alone fundraising consultants. What is the theological basis for professional asking for money?
Well, I think you want to get as much help as you can. If you get, now you can't run a church if you don't have a legal team, because you're going to get into trouble. Yeah. Because the way the world is now, you need legal advice on employment, legal advice on, on everything. So if you get lawyers, you get accountants, you get other professionals. If you feel you need a professional to educate you in an area where you don't have the education, the professional has the expertise that you don't have, then we haven't done it, but if someone else did it, I wouldn't see anything wrong with that, because all you're doing is you're getting someone who has expertise in an area. You're humbly admitting that you don't have the expertise, and the person brings the expertise to help you get to where you're going. But what I say to them in church is that it's one thing to get the skills, but you must make sure you get someone who also has the spirit And that's important to us, because if you get the skills without the Spirit, you could find yourself in a place where you don't want to find yourself. So yeah, I would do that. And in terms of income generating, I'm personally cautious. I see the advantages, but I've also seen a few situations where things haven't gone as well as they should, and it has really rocked the churches that were one or two churches, one of which I was very involved in. So I'm always very cautious. I'm not against it, but I would really be careful. I would check and do all my due diligence and just and make sure, and then finally I would have to get a go-ahead from God for me to step into that. I don't know if that helps.
Thank you. I think that's really helpful. The concern in the Diocese of London was that even within the church family itself, there can be a reticence to be intentional about encouraging giving. And I suppose in part that God has gifted us our minds and our skills to be used alongside the work of the Spirit.
I think so. I think so. I think generally in this area, and that's why this conference is great. That's why I just had to be here, because I think generally in this area we've got to encourage the church to move forward. And it's an area that's fraught with all kinds of challenges. There's a whole load of suspicion out there about anything to do with money. And what I find amusing is that yet we can't do anything without money. So we've just got to kind of, get on with it and get out there and do it right. And so we can set the right example for others to follow. But we can't stay where we are, because if we don't raise the funds, if we don't get the money, then we simply can't do the work of God. It's just as simple as that. It's going to handicap the work of God. And so conferences like this are brilliant, because they bring, right models. We get experts out there who can tell us how to do it. We're better equipped to do it, and we do it the right way by the Bible. But do it we must. That's just what I was trying to say.
Pastor, I think with that glowing endorsement of fundraising, and even of our conference, we want to draw things to a close, and thank you very, very much for the gift of your time today.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. That's great. Yeah, okay.